Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome in to the NBA Front Office Show, kicking off a new week in the NBA. Oh, boy, I think this is the calm before the storm of the NBA trade deadline right now. Rumors, they're starting to pick up a little bit. There's a little bit out there, but I think over the next week or so, we're going to see business really pick up around the league, which means it's a great time to subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications as well. And then follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Do both things. Follow us on the podcast platforms as well as the YouTube channel. Great way to help out the show. And then over on the podcast side, give us that rating and review as well. I know that's a lot to do on a checklist. Follow us two places, rating, review, but that's a way that you can help us out. And before I forget, hit that like button on YouTube too. While you're at it, why not? Let's throw another thing on top of that. Hit that like button too. I'm Trevor Lane. Joining me is Keith Smith. Keith, a new week. And I'm excited about the possibilities that this week brings.
Yeah, I mean, I'm waiting for you to be like, and I need my dry cleaning picked up. I need
yes.
a kid run to this activity. You're just assigning our viewers and listeners all these tasks to do. And you're like, here we go. But we're not asking much. You're already here. No. One more click. One more press of the thumb or the finger is very easy. And just get us going, help us out here on the show. But yeah, a lot of stuff going on. It's funny. I had someone say, nothing's happening. What's going on? And I was like, we didn't even get to trade deadline day before. Like we got this is boring. Why are there no trades? We've already had multiple big trades go on. The Raptors did a lot of their business early. We're going to get into it a little bit later in the show, but they've got some more work. It sounds like they're at least open to doing. So it's not going to be trades every day or every couple days. Generally, it's about 2 weeks out. Things start to pick up a little bit. I think we'll probably get one more decent sized trade that will come in sometime within 2 weeks to 2 days out. And then it's 2 days out is when things really get busy. But I did want to, before we get into the news, part of why I think we're seeing some teams make moves early here is what the standings look like in each conference. We're starting to see a little bit of, I would say, separation on each side. So in the East, you've got the Celtics are 3.5 games up on the Bucks. But then you've got the Bucks, Sixers, and Cavs that are all within 3 games of each other. The Knicks are 3.5 back. Then you have a group of the Heat, Pacers, and Magic. That's the 6, 7, 8 group that are all within a game of each other. The Bulls, Hawks, Nets, Raptors starting to fall out maybe just a little bit there. But that's kind of your bottom of your play-in. And then in the West, it feels like we've kind of got 4 teams atop the conference. Timberwolves, Thunder, Nuggets, and here are the Clippers after they continue to just be on a torrid pace. Then you've got, 4 or 5 teams here that are super tight in the next group from 5 to 8. Pelicans, Mavericks, Suns, and Kings. And then Lakers, Jazz, Rockets, Warriors are tight right around the play-in line. So I think that could be why we're seeing some teams be in a spot where it's, let's be early movers, because not only are we getting the benefit of we traded for this player, but we get an extra 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in the case of the Knicks and OG Anunoby of having this guy on the roster. So I think that's why you may see maybe some more bigger moves here over the next week, let's call it, before we really get in closer to trade deadline range, just because of how compact the standings are on both sides.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a lot of teams that are very motivated or incentivized to try to get stuff done. And the sooner you get it done, the better. I've always felt like, I mean, I guess there's pros and cons to this, but I've felt like, especially in the last few seasons, like the NBA trade deadline needs to be sooner. Like, because once you make your moves, there's not a lot of time left in the schedule. You're well past the halfway point. But on the flip side, teams want more time to figure out who they are and figure out exactly what they need at the trade deadline and all of that. So that's a factor too. But I wouldn't mind seeing it pushed up by a week or two so that teams, after they make their deadline moves, it has a little bit more time for whatever effect that is, whether it's you want to start to tank and you want to start to drop back, whether it's you're going for it, whatever it is that you're doing at the trade deadline. I'd like to see there be a little bit more time in the schedule for those things to actually make a difference.
Yeah, so you're saying almost like right around now, right at the halfway point of the regular season. I think everybody other than the Warriors, we know they've been going through a couple postponed games because of the death of an assistant coach. Everybody else is pretty much right at the halfway point or past it now. So I kind of get that thought process of then if you moved it up a little, I think the teams would come back with we're just really figuring out who we are
Yeah.
coming out of the holidays and the new year and all that. So I could be okay with that. I'm glad it's ahead of the All-Star break. That was always weird. Like that DeMarcus Cousins situation when he got traded and was told after the All-Star game, like in his media scrum, like
Right.
you got traded because it
That's not
happened
good.
like during the game. Like
Right.
that's not great. So I'm glad they moved it up to there. And then that gives everybody really kind of a stress-free All-Star break period. You can just be like, all right, no trade rumors. We're all done. So that I'm all right with where it is, but I can see the thought process behind let's maybe move it up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's going to get interesting. And like you said, there are plenty of teams that right now are incentivized to make moves, to do something to try to move up in the standings. There are some teams that are maybe incentivized to move back in the standings as well, in order to sell off pieces. One of those, which I guess let's jump in here because this kind of leads us right to it. Bruce Brown. Are the Raptors a team that could be looking to take a little bit of a step back or not necessarily be as concerned with getting wins this year? Because it sure feels like they're ready to flip Bruce Brown by the trade deadline. And now, keynote, he can't be aggregated with other trades because he was just brought in from the Indiana Pacers or with other players. So that's important to note when we're looking at a Bruce Brown trade. But it sure seems like the Raptors are ready to, say, hey, welcome and see you later, Bruce Brown.
Yeah, I think what we could see happen here is Toronto try to put themselves in a little bit better of a position to maybe keep that protected pick that they owe to the San Antonio Spurs. That pick is top 6 protected this year. Now there are some who have suggested maybe they just want to get that pick out of the way and then that frees up that obligation. But I think if you're Toronto, if you're really kind of saying, all right, we're resetting here around Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickly, RJ Barrett, Jakob Poeltl, let's add one more good high draft pick. Either we'll draft the player or then we have another trade asset to use in a trade. So as it stands right now, they are sitting, I think it's 7th in the league, but they're right there with Memphis. Like they're a half game up on Memphis, half game behind, depending on how you want to look at it. They're half game away from Memphis. So we've got Detroit, Washington, San Antonio, Charlotte. Those are your worst teams. Portland is behind those teams, but kind of a few games off of those teams. Then you've got Memphis and Toronto. So Toronto's right there straddling that line. On the flip side, Toronto is now 2.5 back of the Hawks for the final play-in point. So I think we're closer to seeing the Raptors say, forget it. Let's go. Let's really. I don't think they're too far away from bottoming out completely. Like you're not catching one of the top teams, but if we can get down to 6 and Memphis passes us, that just increases the chances of us keeping our pick and making a little bit better. So I think we could see that be the direction it goes with them. Now, it only takes one team at that point to jump you, and then you move.
Yeah.
Maybe they think they can be bad enough that they can kind of get ahead of both Memphis and Portland. That's a little bit of a challenge because
that's quite a big drop there.
3.5 up. You'd have to play pretty terrible and have Portland start winning some games kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But again, maybe, right? We don't know where they're thinking. So where that relates to Bruce Brown, I think that is probably not a big part of the future in Toronto. If a team wants to give up, it sounds like Mark Stein had the asking price as a first-round pick and a young player. If that's what and then that's probably also matching salary, right? Because young player's not going to match $22 million. So, but the matching salary that's easy enough for most teams to figure out. So, if that's where the direction's going to be, is get us a young player and a first round pick for Bruce Brown, that says to me we're not really concerned with winning games, because if you were, you'd just keep Bruce Brown and then figure it out this summer with his team option.
Do you see them actually getting that for Bruce Brown, a young player plus a first round? To me, that and they're totally fine that they ask for that. I think I would just be surprised if they actually get that, while acknowledging that not all first round picks are created equal. Not all young players are created equal. Like, that has to be factored in. But on the surface, that feels like a lot.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's one or the other. I think maybe the way you could incent getting both is if you took on a contract that went past this year. So
Mm-hmm.
if you took on a contract similar to Brown's in size, maybe it's a somewhere between 16 and 25 million dollar
Yeah.
contract. If you could do that, then you're kind of thinking, all right, well, we got one, meaning a young player for Brown, and then we got the pick for eating the contract. Maybe that's how you can plus up that return. But I think right now it's probably one or the other. Right now, I don't know. I like Bruce Brown quite a bit. I just don't know that I'm giving up both of those unless I'm a team that has a young player that is completely buried in my rotation that Toronto has a lot of interest in, where it's like, this guy's never going to play enough for us here. It's just not going to happen. Maybe we could make something work. Like, I don't know, Chicago. I'm just making this up, but
Sure.
Chicago has Dalen Terry, who hasn't played very much for them. If Toronto is like, yeah, I really kind of like Dalen Terry, let's go. We'll take him as the young player, somebody else, and then we'll really give you a pick because maybe we don't really care about Dalen Terry because he's not going to play. Maybe something like that happens, but yeah, the standard, like, give me a really good young player in a first round pick. That's probably not going to be a thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. What happens with Bruce Brown's deal next year? He's got a team option. Off the top of my head, I think it's 23 million next season.
Yep.
Does that get picked? I mean, obviously it depends on what team he's on, but that was an interesting wrinkle that Indiana threw in when they gave him this big contract. Is a team that's trading for him, do you think they're likely going to trade for him with the idea that they're going to pick up that team option for next year? Or they're trading for him saying, hey, we can essentially look at this guy as an expiring contract and then give us a little bit more flexibility in the summertime?
Yeah, you hit on it before when you said it depends on who it is. Because if it's a
Yeah.
team that has designs around cap space, let's say it was Philadelphia, for example, I think Philadelphia is more likely to say we're going to decline that team option and we'll go the cap space route instead. If it's a team that is very capped out and they have no chance at cap space, well, let's just say it was your Lakers got him. I think that's maybe a little more likely to be picked up because then, if nothing else, that's 23 million of expiring salary you could use in a trade next year.
Sure.
So I think it really is highly dependent on which team gets him. There's also a third option, and this would probably be more Bruce Brown dependent of you get him and you're like, hey, we really like you. We want to keep you here. Well, we can't do 23 million, but we can do like 3 years, 35 million or something like that. Then maybe you decline that option with the deal in hand of knowing we're going to re-sign you using your non-bird rights. Because the nice thing is at 22 million, his non-bird rights, that gives a team any ability to offer him anything really north of the mid-level exception plus more. So you're really moving into a range where, yeah, we can really offer this guy quite a bit of money here. And that gives them a leg up on re-signing him to a longer term deal.
That's a good point that I hadn't considered. With the non-bird, you can still, it doesn't matter that you don't have his full bird rights. You can go over the cap to sign him because you can still give him a raise, obviously, off of that 22 million. Typically, we think of your non-bird rights come into play with the player who's on a smaller salary.
Yeah,
and
like
then you're
5
like,
or 6 million. Yeah.
Right. And then we're saying, well, they can give him this much, but it's not enough, not enough of an increase. But with a guy who Indiana probably overpaid this year in order to get
100%.
that team option.
Yep.
Then those non-bird rights suddenly become a lot more interesting and a lot more flexible. That's a good point.
Compare it to someone like Miles Bridges. If Miles Bridges is traded, and we're going to keep all of the non-basketball stuff out of this because everybody by this point should know where you and I stand on that. So if you're just talking Miles Bridges basketball player, you trade for him, he loses his bird rights. So now you only have his non-bird rights. Well, his non-bird rights coming off like a under $9 million contract, that's not very attractive, right? That feels like that's not enough for us to get you re-signed. You're probably looking to get at least the mid-level exception from somebody or the mid-level exception equivalent from a team. But But Brown, his non-bird rights are more than enough to re-sign him. And then on a non-bird rights contract too, you can go as many as 4 years on that. So that's also another piece where I think you would really be looking at that and saying, all right, that's we can get to a reasonable number. And I just think that's been overlooked maybe a little bit in discussing what kind of trade asset he is, because we focus on the idea of, well, you can just wipe his contract completely off the books. And certainly a team can do that, but you may be able to do that and then cut his number in half. And then you're in a really good position moving forward if you're a team.
Yeah, exactly. And that is something that I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't think that's being talked about nearly enough with Bruce Brown as an option. I think most people see, well, you're going to use him as cap space, as a way to clear cap space for next year, or you're going to keep him at 23 million. But that third option, that could be really attractive for teams, especially if he goes somewhere where he's willing to stay long term. All right, let's jump over to another team on the trade market here, and let's jump over to my Lakers, and arguably the biggest name out there on the trade market right now, Dejounte Murray. The Lakers' offer for Murray has been revealed. And Mark Stein confirmed this. This goes along with everything that I've heard as well, specifically from the Lakers side. They're not going to put Austin Reeves into a Dejounte Murray trade, but they are trying to build something around D'Angelo Russell. It would include D'Angelo Russell, Jalen Hood-Schifino, their 2029 first-round pick, and perhaps a pick swap as well in the deal in order to get Dejounte Murray to the Lakers. With the Hawks side of things, a holdup being that the Hawks don't really want D'Angelo Russell, because they're concerned that Russell might pick up his player option for next season. And so what they want to do is move D'Angelo Russell to a third team and have an expiring contract come to them instead. And D'Lo has been blowing up. He's been averaging 27 points per game over the last 5 games. He can be extremely streaky, though. We know he's capable of doing this. But it's interesting to note that right before the trade deadline, he's been going off. So that's where things are at right now for Dejounte Murray. Now, there's a lot of teams that will be interested in him. As I said, he's probably the biggest name out there on the market currently, and obviously that can change, and we could argue Zach LaVine as well, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in him. So, Keith, what are your thoughts on kind of where the Lakers' offer sits and the current situation with the Dejounte Murray trade front?
Yeah, and I want to say too, I think it was Mike Scotto of Hoop Type who was I think the first one I saw that said it would be contingent on
the Hawks rerouting him.
To take Russell, or the Hawks having a second deal lined up after to move Russell. So in a vacuum, I think it's a pretty fair offer. I don't have a huge issue with it. I think if you're Atlanta, of course you'd want a little bit more because you gave up far more than that to get Dejounte Murray. But I think you have to look at it on its face and say, we're not going to walk away from a pretty good offer just because it's not what we gave up. Yeah. Sometimes you have to take a loss and you move on from that. So I think a Lakers pick, I've been saying this for a while, give me those Lakers picks that are further out, because we have no idea what the Lakers will be by then. Like there's a good chance they're going to be fine because they're the Lakers and they'll probably be pretty good. But 5 years from now, 6 years from now, I don't know. So I think that part's good. But I get it from the additional piece of they got to have something lined up, because obviously if Murray and Trae Young is not a good backcourt match, Russell and Trae Young is certainly not a good backcourt match. And then what I start to look at is where for D'Angelo Russell, right? Like what team wants him? Like where could he go? And I think the problem that also makes the market a little bit murky on that is you've got Malcolm Brogdon available. You've got Tyus Jones available. You have Murray available. These guys aren't all the same players, but they all are point guard, ball handler, primary creators of offense, where it is, would you rather have Malcolm Brogdon? Would you rather have Tyus Jones? Could you jump in and beat this offer and get Dejounte Murray? And that's, I think, where the problem comes in, is what happens with finding a team to take on Murray. And that's why this could drag out a little bit, because this could be almost one where it's, all right, well, let's see if Brogdon's situation resolves itself. Let's see if the Wizards move Jones. Then all of a sudden it may be, well, you know what? We still need a scoring guard. All right, we're willing to jump in on D'Angelo Russell now, which then kind of greases the skids to let's move this and get this whole thing happening and get these trades moving.
So let me ask you this: in the Lakers situation right now, D'Angelo Russell has a player option this summer. We talked all about it. We talked about it in Vegas at the Wynn Studio. That the Lakers, in agreeing to this deal with D'Angelo Russell, essentially they were putting him on the trade market. As soon as he signed that contract, you knew he was going to be on the trade market. Are they now in a position where they kind of have to trade D'Angelo Russell because they're in a tough spot? Like if he keeps playing the way he's been recently, he's opting out of that contract, and that's the ideal situation for him to opt out. We talked about the Lakers cap situation over on Lakers Nation the other day, last week, and the money's pretty tight. If he opts out and wants more money, I don't know the Lakers can give him that without going over that second tier apron. That's going to get pretty tricky. So are they now in a spot where they kind of have to move him by the deadline?
Yeah, I hadn't really given it a lot of thought on the opt out because I think he was playing poor enough earlier in the season that he's probably going to opt into that. And that's the thing. Danny LaRue says this all the time about a player option is you trust the player will make the right decision for them. That may be the worst decision for the team because it may be like, for example, Davis Bertans. He's going to opt in for next year. He barely plays. He's not worth the contract he has, even with the light guarantee on it, but he's going to opt in and take it. But then you have a guy like LeBron's in a weird spot. So this isn't Paul George. Paul George, if he hits free agency, is going to opt out because he's Paul George and he's that good. Sure. So that's a little bit of a different spot here where Russell, he kind of holds all that power right now of the ability, but he got it, like you said, because the Lakers took the power away from him to block a trade. So the Lakers control that process. Do they have to trade him? I would say no, they don't have to. But the challenge is exactly what you laid out. I don't think you're going to get next summer D'Angelo Russell saying, all right, I'll do it again. I'll do a 1+1 and again waive my no trade because he's going to be at some way. He's going to be like, either you want me here or you don't, right? Like I don't want to keep playing this game where the next 6 months of my life I am on the trade block. So I think there becomes a whole situation with Russell of, yeah, you probably would rather get it done now. That doesn't mean you're just giving him away, right? Exactly. And that doesn't mean you just have to toss him out the door. And if 2 weeks from now he's still playing great, if he's playing like he's played over the last week and a half or so, maybe you just say, we're all right. We're just going to keep him because
and we'll deal with what comes. Yeah.
Yeah. And none of these guys plus picks in young play, none of them are enough of an upgrade over how he's been playing over the last couple of weeks. That could be a little bit of fool's gold, right? Everybody has hot streaks, but he was a big part of the turnaround last season. So it really is a complicated situation.
It is. And how they navigate this and how the Hawks navigate this with Dejounte Murray. They don't have to move him right now. Nope. They can move him over the summer if they want to, if they're really determined to. So how they navigate this is going to be absolutely fascinating to watch. I was hearing optimism from the Lakers side that they thought there was a potential deal they could get done without Austin Reeves in it. I think that still exists. The question is, what is that ultimately going to look like? Who would that third team be? How would that go down? And then, there are other teams that are interested. I mean, I guess let's just talk about it. The Bucks are a team that was reportedly interested in Dejounte Murray. I don't see how they get him though. They might be interested, but I don't see how they get it. I am interested in a jackpot winning lottery ticket, Keith.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in that.
If we weren't married, this would have been the old I am interested in Supermodel X here, right?
I almost went there and then I knew better. I went, no, I
it's
can't
how
say that.
One of our wives watches this anyway. And mine's not actually in the room today, so I probably could have just gone there, right? But anyway, we'll be good husbands. Yeah, they're interested for sure. But the problem is basically anything that they do would have to start with Bobby Portis, who is a major key player for the Milwaukee Bucks as far as being he's the number one front court backup. If anything happens to Lopez and or Giannis, he's the guy. He's the one who steps in right away for those two guys and picks up his minutes in a big, big way. Somebody threw out to me, like, could they move Chris Middleton? I just don't see what that does for the Hawks. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And other than that, right, you're not trading Giannis, obviously. You're not trading Dame. You're 99% not trading Brook Lopez, I'm pretty certain. So that really leaves probably Bobby Portis, and then maybe you could craft something around Pat Connaughton, but that would have to be Connaughton and like 6 guys that are making minimums. And then your problem runs into the Hawks have to then waive a whole bunch of players to bring in those salaries in an unbalanced trade. So I mean, sure, I get it, but I just don't see where it comes from. What's funny enough is if this was it's odd because they're another team that's been mentioned for Murray is the Miami Heat. Now, the Heat's offer would presumably be around Kyle Lowry and his expiring contract, which does make some sense for Atlanta. But anytime I hear of a deal and I'm like, I don't see how they make the money work, unless it's Miami or sometimes Oklahoma City, I'm like, I don't get it. I don't see where it's coming from. And then they do surprise me at times when it's like, okay, they kind of figured something out here. But for now, I just find it hard to believe the Bucks have a reasonable path to Dejounte Murray. And this is where I'll pause and say, any trade can be made in the NBA as far as finding the matching salary rules.
If you're determined.
Yeah. But there's a bunch that this is just because it works in a trade machine doesn't mean it actually works, right?
It just conceptually, I look at, like I get it. You want to put a strong defender next to Damian Lillard, but Dejounte Murray, like he's not the defender that he was with the Spurs. Maybe that comes back if he's on a team that doesn't need his offense as much. And that's something that I think could be a real thing. And we see happen in the NBA. But if I'm the Bucks, wouldn't the guy to go get be like Alex Caruso or something like that?
Oh yeah.
And put 100%. Him next to Dame? Wouldn't you rather do that? I don't know. It could be the Bulls just say, nope, we're not trading him, period. That's possible. But that type of player, wouldn't that be the better move to make and the easier move to pull off salary wise?
I think so. In my opinion. Now, the other problem for the Bucks in any of these trades, they don't have draft picks to trade anymore because they owe everything. So let's start in 2024 this year. It's either New Orleans can swap for it. Next year, they owe it to New Orleans or New York, depending on where it lands. 2026, New Orleans can swap for it. 2027, it goes to New Orleans. 2028, that pick they do have, so that can be kind of a weird place, but Portland, if Portland has moved a pick, Portland could swap for that pick. 2029, they owe to Portland. 2030 is a swap to Portland. You can trade a pick that is swapped, but they're encumbered by the Stepien rule because they owe an actual pick every other year. So Milwaukee is out of tradable first-round picks. That also makes any one of these deals really hard for them to pull off. Now, they did it last year. They got Jay Crowder because they traded, ultimately it ended up being like 5 second-round picks or something like that.
5 second-round picks, yep.
So maybe something like that could go down again. But I think if it's a guy, I'll use Caruso because Caruso's a guy I can tell you talking to teams, like everybody's calling the Bulls, like what it'll take. And the Bulls know, like, hey, we should be able to get a first rounder for him just because everybody wants him because his contract super easily acquirable. And he's a guy you could just plug into any number of roles. He could start at the 2. You could start him at the 3. You could probably start him at the 1 if you had other offense creators out there with him, or you bring him off the bench. And no matter what, he's going to be a great defender, decent shooter, decent ball handler, decent passer. He's going to fit right in. So I think the Bulls know, hey, we don't need to move the guy. We're kind of playing all right now. And 2, if we do trade him, we're going to get better than here's 55 second round picks or here's kind of yucky matching salary.
I like that. Yucky matching salary. That's
Would you put up in your background?
What did I put up in my background? Oh, I didn't even mean to. I put up that's a signed Magic Johnson basketball.
Nice.
And I was cycling through some of my images. I was looking for my next thing I was going to put up. I didn't intend to put it up on the screen.
I love it.
But I had that one saved. And there it is for everybody to see.
At first I was like, wait, is it? Yeah, I was like, it doesn't look like it says Alex Caruso. I was like, Trevor flexing that he owns an Alex Caruso signed ball.
There's my Alex Caruso signed basketball. No, it's a Magic Johnson signed ball that I put up there. Here, I'll switch that in just a moment. Here, let's why don't you talk about the Knicks' interest in Malcolm Brogdon, and I'll get that all fixed up.
Sure. Yeah. So where this one comes out of, it's multiple reporters have had this. I think what is very interesting on this idea with Malcolm Brogdon is the Knicks are looking to bring in someone who is replacing Emmanuel quickly, scoring off the bench. Like they lost quite a bit of bench production when they traded quickly in the deal to get OG Anunoby. Now it's worked out fine. They've been great since getting Anunoby. So there's clearly no complaints coming out of New York about that. But I think what's interesting is where do they go? Now, if it's a guy like Brogdon, anybody who makes that much money, you're starting with Evan Fournier. And this is where I want to pause for a second. Every time we mention this, somebody jumps in the comments is like, Evan Fournier stinks. He doesn't have that kind of value. It's not about that. You
Right.
have to match salary. It'd be Fournier plus Quentin Grimes in a draft pick or something like that. And that's where I think that could get kind of interesting for Portland is give us Fournier. We'll figure out that contract. Either we'll undo, we'll decline his team option, or we'll pick it up and trade him later. Grimes, not perfect in a deep Portland backcourt, but we'll figure it out. We're young, we can sort through that and give us a pick. And it probably doesn't need to be one of the great picks. That could probably be one of New York's own picks, maybe the Dallas pick this year, something like that, and go. So I think there could be a match here, but we've also heard them in on Dejounte Murray. We've heard them in on Bruce Brown. That came out over the weekend. Bruce Brown was very funny. Like he talked about how much he loves New York and respects Tom Thibodeau. So I don't know. He gets it. My question is, Bruce Brown seems like that's an awful lot of what you get from Josh Hart. Like I don't get that one necessarily, where Brogdon would come in and give you a very different player who could give you 15, 16 points off the bench easily.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, getting to see Malcolm Brogdon last night when the Lakers took on the Blazers, he's same old Malcolm Brogdon. I mean, super efficient, did all the things that you would expect him to do. I think the Blazers, first of all, I think he's going to get moved. I think he's going to be traded by the trade deadline. And I think the Blazers will get a decent return for him. I think that he is such an easy plug and play guy at either guard position, especially whether you need to start him, bring him off the bench, whatever, you can do that. So I think that kind of versatility is going to really increase his market. The Knicks, again, I don't know that that's the best team to go after, but I could see. I think there's probably going to be maybe 10, maybe could be as many as 10 teams. I think that'll be interested in trading for Malcolm Brogdon.
Yeah, I don't know if they have had conversations or anything. This is just me spitballing. Orlando should be trying to get Malcolm Brogdon.
Sure.
He would be a perfect fit because he doesn't detract from Franz and Paulo. He's not somebody who's going to come in and be like, all right, I need to eat up 30% usage here. He's not that kind of guard anymore, but he would solve a lot of the issues they have in their backcourt shooting wise. He's big enough that he can play either on or off ball. He can really guard, he's not a great defender, but he's fine. I know that from his run with the Celtics last year. He can do what he needs to do, especially if he has other good defenders around him, which he would have in Orlando. So that'd be somebody I'd really be pushing for if I was the Magic, just because he makes so much sense. And you're not locking into anything super long term or $40+ million like a potential Zach LaVine trade or anything like that.
All right, let's jump over to the Dallas Mavericks, who reportedly have some interest in trading for Kyle Kuzma. Now, Keith, the rumor is that the Wizards, who, I mean, they could trade a bunch of guys at the trade deadline, but that they would be looking for at least a couple of first-round picks in exchange for Kyle Kuzma. What would a deal look like between the Mavs and the Wizards? And then, is Kuzma the right target for Dallas?
I don't hate Kuzma for them. I think you have a couple defenders that can protect for him in the lineup, whether it be Lively, if he's kind of the backline guy. You have Exum when he gets back. You've got a guy like Josh Green. Luka's actually been playing pretty good defense this year for kind of the first time in his career. I think he's gotten a little more serious on that end of the floor. So I think Kuzma could really help them. Grant Williams has not worked out. He was lights out in like the first 2-3 weeks of the season.
Yeah, he was.
And then he's been terrible since then. He's like under 40% shooting overall, and he's barely over 30% from three. He's coming off the bench now. He just has not been very good. So I don't hate Kuzma there, just to give them one more scorer, one more guy who can knock down shots, a guy who, if either Luka or Kyrie is out, you can go to him. I think in a playoff series, you probably structure it so two of the three are always on the floor, or at the very least, one of the three is always out there. And I think his contract is pretty friendly too, because it's that declining contract year to year for Kuzma. So Dallas's problem is if they're going to hold to, we want 2 first-round picks. That's a little trickier for them because, again, they still have this outstanding pick to the Knicks. That'll probably convey this year. I'm fairly certain Dallas is going to be a playoff team. So that's going to go this year. Then they will pick in 2029 to the Nets. So that really kind of makes right now, today, the only tradable pick, their 2027 pick. But there's ways you can do some stuff. They also have a pick that can be swapped with San Antonio. So you could potentially figure out something down the line if there was language you needed to write in or whatever. But that's where, it's just when you owe future picks, it gets really tricky. And I think we're seeing some teams say, we're not doing the 7 years of pick protection anymore, or even the 4 or 5 years. Like, this needs to resolve in year 1 or 2, because otherwise it just ties us up for too long.
Now, I was also looking at, is there a player that might be worth a first-round pick in terms of value that the Mavs could give up? And I look at Josh Green, but correct me if I'm wrong here, wouldn't he fall under the poison pill?
Yeah, he's
situation?
poison pilled. Yeah. So that makes it hard to move him.
Right.
Omax,
Omax.
Prosper, like maybe he, I would probably do that in lieu of a second first-round pick, just because I think I like Omax Prosper. I think the chances of him ever being as good as Kyle Kuzma are probably fairly low. So he's not going to be the same player, obviously, a very different kind of player. So I'm all right with that. Like, if that's the direction they wanted to go, where let's plug him in there. And I saw some Wizards fans responses to those things where, well, we need Derek Lively. Well, that's not happening. Like, that's that's not going to be a thing. So get that out of here. And you're probably going to have to take back Rashawn Holmes or maybe Tim Hardaway Jr. But the Wizards they signaled in the Marvin Bagley trade, this is not a quick fix for us. We're willing to take money into next year. We're willing to operate as an over the cap team. Just pay us to do it. And I think you take on Rashawn Holmes and Prosper maybe, and that gets you close. You probably have to take one more guy in there. And then now we're moving in a direction where, all right, this makes some sense and we could probably get something done. But we'll see. My guess is this probably doesn't happen, but I think it at least opens up the idea of Kyle Kuzma is probably available if a team really wants to make the right offer.
Yeah. And I think that's probably true of most of the Wizards players.
Yeah.
I
think everybody, there was a report today, I wish I was looking for, and I can't find who tweeted it. Basically, it came out, it's everybody but Bilal Coulibaly.
Yeah,
like
I saw that as well.
You want anybody else, we're open for business, but we're not trading Bilal Coulibaly. And that makes a lot of sense. Him and I think the other guy, I'm not by any means suggesting he's untradeable or untouchable. Corey Kispert, I would probably try to keep if I was Washington, just because you've got a couple more years on his rookie scale deal. And then I will say Denny Avdia is essentially untradeable just because of the poison pill provision. So that's kind of takes him off the table right now, but really truly untouchable player. That's Coulibaly.
All right. We talked about the Knicks a little bit already, but the Hawks, Grizz, Jazz, Rockets, all teams that have interest in Quentin Grimes. Think he's getting moved? He goes somewhere?
I think so. Yeah, I think if it's not now, it's going to be this summer for sure. I think him and Fournier, kind of that becomes the package plus one of those extra picks the Knicks are sitting on. There's your trade offer package to go get somebody. I am fairly well convinced that if Fournier is not moved by the deadline, the Knicks will pick up their team option on him just to keep the trade options open with his salary. So I think that's probably where this heads, but good chance maybe this happens by the deadline, probably in a move where they bring in a veteran that can help them now. And Grimes is here's the young upside piece we can sell to our fans, and we'll play him 30 minutes a night after the deadline and see what it looks like.
All right. Last thing we've got for today, the Pelicans are actually not interested in moving Herb Jones, contrary to other reports, which makes more sense. I mean, they did just sign him to that contract this last summer. I think he's on a pretty team-friendly deal for what he provides. Yes, you can be concerned about, are there issues in the playoffs because it doesn't provide a lot on the offensive end of the floor or not quite as much as you would hope? Sure. Are there, you've got to deal with re-signing Trey Murphy. There's that situation, but Herb Jones is still a really good player. One of the better wing defenders in the NBA. So it makes sense to me that the Pelicans would say, yeah, let's hang on to this guy.
Yeah, he's like the antithesis to Austin Reeves, where he's the defensive version of the same contract, where Reeves is the offensive version of the same contract. These guys are making below mid-level money. I get it. The Pelicans cap sheet, it's weird. If you look at it right now, you're like, it's not that bad. They got out of Kyra Lewis's contract. Mm-hmm. They're under the luxury tax. Yeah, and then next year you got to re-sign Brandon Ingram, Jonas Valanciunas. You've got some other stuff to work out. Zion's on a max. CJ McCollum makes a ton of money. Trey Murphy, the third, is coming up to be paid. So it is getting very messy there in New Orleans, and they're going to have to do something at some point. But Herb Jones is, to me, that's not the something. You gave him the max you could give him as an early bird free agent, same as Austin Reeves got. Outside of if there had been an offer sheet and matching and all the stuff that didn't happen for either guy. So I think with Jones, you gave him that with the idea of things are really messy salary-wise. We're going to have to trade you 6 months later. I think you gave it to him with the idea of, now you're a big part of this and that contract fits almost no matter how expensive we get. That's going to continue to be a value contract. Because for my money, I don't know if there's a better wing defender in the league night to night than him. Game to game, possession to possession, sure. Like Kawhi can still bring it when he needs to. I mean, we've seen LeBron still summons it when he needs to, but they're not doing it 82 games a year anymore. Those guys are maybe amping up the defense 35, 40 games a year now. And then we'll see what they do come playoff time, but that's fine. That's where they're at in their careers. Jones brings it every single night. So I get now this report way more than the idea that he really was somebody they were looking at. Yeah, if somebody says, hey, what do you want to do 4 first-round picks and 3 swaps for Herb Jones? The Pelicans are probably like, okay, sure. I mean, that's the whole, everybody's available for the right price. Ted DiBiase, right? Everybody has a price, but it's, it's just probably not going to be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar, like you said, to Austin Reeves, where is he really untouchable? No. But if a team is like, for what teams are likely to offer, like, you're not going to have a team calling up the Pelicans saying, hey, here's everything you want for Herb Jones. Like, that's not going to happen. So just realistically, he's not a guy you're going out there trying to move or anything like that. If the Bucks call up the Pelicans and say, hey, you guys interested in Giannis? I'm sure Herb Jones is available.
Yeah, I'm sure the Pelicans are. Hey, Herb, pack your bags, buddy. You're headed to Milwaukee. See you later. Yeah. I mean, in on the flip side, if the Bucks call up and say, hey, how about Pat Connaughton? The Pelicans are going to be like, how about no way? See you later, right? Like there are guys who are hard to trade because their contract stinks. There's guys who are hard to trade because they're poison pilled. There's guys who are hard to trade because they're really good non-value contracts and their teams don't want to give them up. So that makes them really hard to acquire from a team. So it's just, there's all different situations. And again, just because it works in the trade machine doesn't mean it actually works in real life. Like we could sit here for the next 3 hours coming up with workable Herb Jones trades and trade machines, and all of them are ones the Pelicans would probably say, no, not interested too. So that's just gives you a sense of where that goes.
How many times are you going to use that phrase over the next few weeks?
I don't know. We have at least 15 more shows, so probably somewhere between 10 and 20.
I don't know. I mean, on a daily, like, how many times do you have to tell people that?
Yeah.
Because you get, like, I get a lot of people throwing trades at me. Like, what do you think about this trade? What do you think about that trade? I know you get even more than I do.
I don't answer them on Twitter. So just
right.
Full disclosure, if anybody is like, hey, I sent you a trade, can you look at it on Twitter? I'm not going to, because then it opens the floodgates. And then for the next 3 hours, it's, hey, evaluate this fake trade for me. And then I start getting really frustrated because the values are crazy. Or worse than that, it's like, that guy has a trade restriction, or this whatever trade machine you're using is broken. Like, that guy's not even on the roster anymore, and things like that. And then I just get really mad, and it's like and I don't need to introduce that stress to my life. So no. There's two things I'm going to repeat a lot. It'll be that on here on any radio hit I do is Just because it works in the trade machine doesn't mean it works in real life. And then in about 2-ish weeks, when we start talking about buyouts even more, I will repeat probably quite often, that guy is more name than game, because it just means you recognize the name, but he really can't play anymore. And that's probably why he's on the buyout market. And good luck, if you want to go that way. And then we'll talk a lot more about buyouts and everything as we get closer to that time, because we got all the new buyout rules and all that other stuff, which we would have already been talking by now about, well, teams aren't going to trade for this guy because they'll just
He's going to get bought out
on the buyout market. Well, the rules have changed quite a bit, especially for the teams that probably would be most interested in some of those guys on the buyout market. But that's another topic for another day.
Absolutely. Yep. It's something we can certainly get into, maybe even as soon as on tomorrow's show. But lots going on around the NBA. You never know when news is going to break. So once again, make sure you subscribe to the Front Office channel here on YouTube. Don't forget to turn on those notifications as well. And do us a favor, tell a friend. Just add one more thing to your checklist of things to do. Tell a friend about the show. We sure do appreciate that. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.